Welcome to the 136th edition of airhacks TV, and we have some questions, lots of topics, and lots of announcements actually. And let's start with the conference report, because I attended an interesting conference last week. And this was Cloudland in Park Soltau. This was the location. And this is like a leisure park. But yeah, it was a really nice event. And I was in the hotel, which looked like a mix of Western and pirate theme, which was really nice. And what's interesting about the conferences, so I delivered next week, a workshop Hardcore Serverless Java. And what I did at the conference, I delivered a session Hardcore Serverless and Serviceful Java. And the unusual thing is I got 1.5 hours, which is a lot for a conference talk. And I got lots of feedback, lots of questions, and we cover basically, so the gist of the session is use Java if you have CPU intensive workloads, and no Java or no code if you just waiting for your IO. This is what we did, and I showed a lots of code, but the time was not enough. This was interesting part. So there were 1.5 hours were not enough to show everything. So we had to, I think after 1 hour and 45 minutes, I had to stop. But we will have on next week, there will be 7 hours, but I have the fear that it will also not be enough to cover all the aspects of serverless Java. So what we plan to do in the workshop is to cover serverless pipelines, serverless workflows, and Lambda, which we already covered, event bridge, step functions, everything from the Java perspective. Waiting for IO with no code. Yeah, what we will do in the workshop, or what we already did in Cloudland, is I implemented step functions code, which invoked SDKs from AWS, and there was no Java code involved. It was completely serverless managed service, but of course the entire infrastructure was provisioned with Java. So there was no code at runtime, but the entire infrastructure was provisioned with Java code. So there were step functions, and I did the same with event bridge with event transformations, and we will also do this during the workshop. So there are a few seats left. So you can register via Meetup and Meetup or Eventbrite, both. And this will be the topics. And yeah, this is the gist of the thing. The new stuff is that you can actually with step functions. You can wait until something happens, and with event bridge, it is harder to achieve. So this was Cloudland, a nice conference. We'll try to attend next year as well. And the interesting part was the reaction of the attendees, because they told me some people tried, before the session, they told me Java is not well suited, and maybe we'll do this in Python. And during the session, they noticed that Java is actually perfect. So this is what there was the feedback. Okay, so this was Cloudland. And now maybe the next announcement. And the next announcement is the workshop Gen AI patterns. So, and this is like the advancement of the workshop we did last year. But there is something new. So there is an introduction of MCP, Model Context Protocol, so which we'll do during the workshop. But the interesting part for you is, first, there is a part of the infrastructure called ZB, ZeroDependencies Builder, and this is the builder. So I introduced the ZB for you, and I use it a lot, but I decided to open source that. And what it does is fairly simple. So look at this. This is one of the shorts. So it's just hello world. And what ZB can do is the ZB can it just created here a ZBO file, and hopefully ZB configuration file, where I can specify what is the jar output and where the jar should go. And if you do nothing, is conventional, it puts the jar in app.jar. But the interesting part is if ZB finds a main method, it makes an executable jar. So if we go here, I can execute the code. So ZB here helps me to create automation script with Java, and ZB itself is implemented without any external dependencies. And it is crazy fast. So this project compiles and builds the jar in 180 milliseconds. And larger projects, which I will introduce in a second, they are built under a second. It's just fun. Of course, I could use Maven, but ZB, there's no configuration if you have no dependencies, and most of my projects have no dependencies these days. Okay, this is ZB. Now, a little bit more serious project, which I already use a lot, is the following. So let's see where. So it is the ZMCP, Zero Dependencies Model Context Protocol. So what this is I actually open sourced that or released that today in order to show you this, and we will discuss it and this week and Thursday about MCP. So what MCP is, Model Context Protocol, easy to explain, is like JCA Java connector architecture maybe, what was before, or like a gateway between the LLMs and your enterprise infrastructure basically. And the MCP comprises three parts. They are prompts, resources, and tools. And this is implemented by ZMCP completely. So what it means is you can plug ZMCP in pure Java. So you have the code, so you see what happens. To Claude, let's say. Then ask Claude, show me what's on my disk. And if you allow, you can ask ZMCP to go to a folder and return the files, for instance. So this is the ability to for an LLM to interact with the real world over a standardized interface. So, and the challenge is, of course, ZMCP is just like a gateway, but how to plug your logic, right? And I used Service Loader for that, but I cannot show you this right now because I'm not logged in and it is not open source yet, but there's a project ZMCP-tool, which I will open source after the show. And it should be already mentioned here. Maybe, wait a sec. ZB is there, but there is no tool. Yeah, it is ZMCP tool, but it's not available because I forgot to release that. But the fun story is I use Service Loader, so you can build tools or plugins without being dependent on ZMCP itself. So you can create your own project, you create your own, you have to implement a function, Java util function with the signature, and you have your own tool, and the tool can talk to whatever you like. This is no Quarkus, no MicroProfile, no Jakarta, just pure Java 21 without any external dependencies. And let's see. So we could build ZB, ZMCP, and with ZB, and the project is larger, so it builds in 800 milliseconds. Okay, 67 files, but yeah, and you get. This is what I use. I hope it's fun. It's just I use it for me, and I don't use it in my commercial projects. My projects, enterprise projects, are still Maven, still minimalistic Maven, and it works fine. But this works even better for my personal use. If you like, take a look at this, and yeah. And if you are interested in Model Context Protocol, which and maybe a little bit agents. So I don't know whether we will manage to talk about agents, but from Java perspective, what we do in the workshop is just Java perspective, and what we also do is GPU acceleration a little bit. Okay, this is the announcements. So we announced the ZMCP, the ZB, and now let's go to your questions. So this is the serious stuff. So, and the first question is, there's a talk, Java 1 talk, real world lean Java practices, patterns, hacks, and workarounds. And this talk is interesting because I delivered the talk the first time at JFocus conference, and I was unhappy with the result because I spent lots of time with the slides to discuss the concepts. And then Java 1 happened, and I registered the talk with the same title once again. But then, because of jet lag, I couldn't sleep. So the night before, I completely refactored the talk and provided more code, more examples. And it went well, surprising well. And on YouTube, I checked that last week. There were 28,000 views, which is a lot for a Java talk, I would say. So it's doing well. But someone watched the talk, and I got on LinkedIn a question. I got me interested in learning how to write minimal Java applications. So someone said, okay, if you like the talk, and how to build minimal Java applications. So funny enough, the ZB and ZMCP, they are such a minimalistic Java applications. But in enterprise projects, what I do, you cannot just implement everything without having external dependencies. So you have to be cautious. But you should ask yourself, for every dependency, is it really necessary? Is there a Java functionality which already covers this functionality? Kundo, thank you for the feedback for JFocus talk. I was not satisfied with the JFocus talk because I thought, is it like a management talk, right? But if you like it, I'm glad, because I was not satisfied. They completely refactored the JFocus talk, and the cool story is, if you watch both talks, both are recorded. This JFocus and Java 1 talks is the same title, but I guess the contents are, of course, go in similar directions, but completely different. Which I like, because I hate to talk about the same topic twice, because it's boring for me and maybe for audience as well. And the talks are recorded anyway, so why to talk about the same topic twice? First, external dependencies, and then what I also said. Okay, actually, the Java 1 talk was self-evident, maybe. So for me, it was like nothing really new. What I just said is try to avoid external dependencies, focus on business logic, so concepts from your code, and then and have a reason for things you are doing. So forget all the patterns and all the best practices, and question everything and write simple code. So this was basically the gist of the entire thing. And now I'm going to learning how to write minimal Java applications. I would say what I do in enterprise project, I start with Java SE, and this is a good starting point. And if there are not enough functionality, I extend the search to MicroProfile or Jakarta IE. I'm using Quarkus because the fastest and smallest runtime right now. And with Quarkus, I'm using MicroProfile and Jakarta IE in a convenient way. And if this is not enough, then I would extend the search to external Quarkus extensions. So this is the trajectory. But over time, what happens is I'm able over time to delete more and more MicroProfile functionality and replace that with Java SE. For instance, sometimes I don't use MicroProfile HTTP REST client anymore. I use HTTP client from Java 11 instead, for instance. And the interesting part is the structure, what I do for maybe 25 years already. So entity control boundary, package info, and so forth. It is really good for LLMs. So if you structure the project in this way, LLMs really get the intentions, and they generate a really good code for you. And I actually submitted a session to Devoxx, maybe it will happen. And maybe see you at Devoxx. So I think it is hard to explain, but you got the idea. And if you take a look at ZMCP, which is not done yet, and I'm not happy with the test coverage, for instance. But until Thursday, a lot will happen. So if you would like to take a look at MCP, wait until Thursday. This would be my advice. Okay, I got a nice message 6 hours ago from Paul, and he asked me, I would be interested how to get into consulting. So, and it is hard to tell right now how to start as a consultant. I have no idea, because I'm not working for large companies. I get contacted directly by companies. And what I do is I do almost everything. So I perform code reviews regularly for companies. Got lots of requests. What I also do is I help companies to migrate old project to new platforms. I help to start projects, to design. So what happens frequently right now is companies ask me, "We would like to build this. How?" And I start, maybe one day with concepts, and the next day we are coding already, usually. And and from time to time trainings. So I don't think you can be only consultant. You have to do a little bit more. But I started with Java from the beginning, and I get returning clients which ping me every 10 years because something has to do. Because I have lots of clients, not a problem for me. If I would start right now, maybe it would be harder. It's hard to tell. And also, this is interesting. What would you say is a good possibility to learn more about large-scale systems and their interworking? So I think there should be no large systems. I think projects which went well, what we managed to do is to build smaller systems, and they interacted between each other, and all the smaller systems made up the larger system. This was a good project, and then it was trivial, basically. So, and I think how to start to do this, I would say, if you have fire and forget functionality, like, send email, send message, send order or something like this, then you can rely on asynchronous messaging, for instance, which has to be reliable. And otherwise, I just prefer request response, which is synchronous, and is always better than, reactive programming or whatever you had back then. So and large, if you and the problem is, or the best practice, if you design a large system is, I would say, don't distribute. So this is the only best practice that counts, because if you start distributing the system on Java system to multiple JVMs, what you will have to do is you will have to think about replication, failover, disaster recovery. And this is the beginning of the end, because then the system gets more and more complex. So I start to build simple systems which are large, and simple means, minimalistic Java applications, which can be quite big, but if they were well structured, not a problem. And if you and then you will find, okay, this system is too big because I have two teams or something happens, and everyone knows that you can split the system. And if this is the common wisdom, split the system to two systems. And the next question is how they communicate with each other. And if you have no idea, start with REST, because it's the easiest part. And or sometimes naturally you find out it should be a message, right? Like on AWS would be Event Bridge. On premise could be a JMS or Kafka is not a messaging. Kafka is more a database. Something like this. Okay. I hope it is clear. Other than that, maybe protocols, and also don't misuse protocols, right? What we have, REST is common sense. Then we get asynchronous protocol, which is messages, and Kafka is more like a Git for me conceptually, or a database, because you can store the messages forever. And in fact, recently I got a feedback from a client a few years ago, advised to do that, and they told me, they have retention period forever on Kafka, and this is basically a database, which is a good thing, because then it can reply messages and it works well. And ask me, but how long does the system start? Fast redeploy is crucial for dev productivity. All the systems, if they are Quarkus systems, I think they will start under 3 seconds for sure. So in my recent projects without unit tests, I think it will still start under 1 second. So if you go to Kubernetes route or networking route, then the system will start slower, because you have usually timeouts in place, discovery. So this is the slowness, not necessarily Java. And if you don't have external dependencies, you can build huge systems with thousands of Java classes, and they will still start fast. So what made systems slow is Back then, if you had no JPA or Hibernate, the metadata has to be gathered at startup of the system, and the queries had to be prepared, and this sometimes led to slower startup times. So you have to be careful with that. But other than that, I think Java is pretty fast. And there's a project Layden and crack coordinated restore at checkpoint. I cannot remember this. Crack is also on the horizon. So I hope, Paul, you are happy with the answer, hopefully. Okay, ZeroDependency Builder introduced, Zero Model Context Protocol also introduced, and I also have the Zero Web Server, which I use for testing, also introduced, and take a look, it is ready to go. Okay. Now, if you use Quarkus and you have hot reload, initial startup times does not matter. Others have that as well. Yes, I think so. But a Quarkus hot reload and Micronaut ones are the fastest, and the others are slower. And I use Quarkus because mostly all my projects are now in. Actually, all projects are serverless right now in the public cloud, and with Quarkus we can save money. That's the reason. Okay, a microservice starts in 1 minute. Maybe, Kaspar. It's hard to tell. If you have old legacy system, 5 minutes is already fast because a WebSphere would start slower than this. So 5 minutes is a lot if I think about this, and 1 minute is also a lot. So the question is what happens behind the scenes, because not just the amount of code, there's something happens there, right? So amount of the dependencies or introspection, reflection, or whatever. Never saw a monolith that would start in reasonable time. So what is for you monolith? Maybe for me a monolith would be, I don't know, a few thousand Java classes, reasonable Java classes. Then it starts fast. And maybe there are exaggerated monoliths. There are a few thousand Java classes and a few hundred external dependencies just for fun. And this will start in minutes, right? So therefore, this is a good point, Kaspar. For instance, sometimes back then I got lots of requests from clients to help them to break a monolith into microservices. It was a common request. And what we started with, we refactored the monolith and removed unnecessary dependencies, make the code leaner. And what often happened, there was no need to implement microservices. And starting with a legacy monolith and make it nicer is always a good exercise, because you learn what happens inside and you get a better ideas how to split the monolith into independent parts. There's a colleague of mine said a few days ago that Quarkus is a bad choice because there are more open jobs for Spring Boot. Yeah, maybe, but maybe it is a bad sign, right? If there are more open jobs for Spring Boot, it means but the question is, how many developers do you need? And it's just maybe it's also a choice. But these days it should be not a problem to get a Quarkus developers. But you should not search for Quarkus developers. If you have a Quarkus, just search for MicroProfile Jakarta in J2E developers, and if they have that knowledge, they will understand Quarkus immediately. So you don't need an explicit Quarkus developer. By the way, on that note, last year I was invited to Java user group, a university session, and there were Python developers and non-Java developers, and the session was about the way how we develop Java applications. And I said Quarkus is way too complicated because lots of tutorials and which is true. If you go to JAX-RS, for instance, you will find in Quarkus 5 possibilities to achieve the same, right? And I was stunned. So okay, this is interesting because I never used the Quarkus tutorials, and they asked me, okay, but how you know what to do? And the interesting part is I'm not using Quarkus tutorials. I use MicroProfile. If you go to MicroProfile and open JAX-RS specification, for instance, you will find immediately code examples, and this is how I implement Quarkus applications, which are then independent of Quarkus, right? So if you search for MicroProfile or Jakarta or J2E developers, you should find more developers, right? Okay, but open Spring Boot jobs means what? That they are searching for Spring developers, or you don't get Spring developers? The question is, what do you like to achieve, right? Yeah, Spring also had hot reload, and all applications had servers had hot reload. I think, I don't know, 20 years ago, Glassfish had hot reload. And there was also a common question because everyone used back then Java Rebel, JRebel, and Quarkus was fast enough. Glassfish was fast enough. There was no common question why I'm not use JRebel, because this hot reload in Glassfish was fast enough for me. So Mark Teufel asked me, what you would prefer if you could choose, Wildfire application server or Quarkus? So I would prefer right now Quarkus for most cases, but something like Wildfire application server could actually come back. So the concept of Wildfire application server. So why I prefer Quarkus right now is because if you take a look at Quarkus and you take a look at the Wildfire, so Quarkus has all the components from Wildfire, but is refactored to be faster. And the main difference between Wildfire and Quarkus is that Quarkus optimizes at build time and Wildfire optimizes at startup time. That's the only difference, because Quarkus has all the components from Wildfire application server. Also, my impression is that lots of developers internally moved from Wildfire to Quarkus. So I think Quarkus is the next hot thing. This is why I would prefer Quarkus. Having said that, Wildfire application server could be still interesting. Why? Because what Wildfire can do, Quarkus cannot do. Is what you could do is you can deploy a Wildfire on a large EC2 machine, let's say, and deploy lots of wars on a Wildfire, and what you get is a kind of a small Kubernetes, right? We cannot do this with Quarkus, because with every Quarkus you get it consumes a little bit more memory. So I would say, yeah, but this is a very unusual use case. So having said that, I didn't use Wildfire for years, and all my projects are Quarkus right now. Okay, now Mr. Siddharth asked me, logging frameworks like Logbag are relevant in Serverless Lambda when using Quarkus, Amazon Lambda, REST. My understanding is console logs are consumed by CloudWatch. Is that right understanding? Siddharth, absolutely. What I'm doing, look at my projects, my AWS Lambda with Quarkus, everything is system out. It is, I wrap a System.out.println with an interface with nicer methods, which I can disable and re-enable. This is all we have. And System.out.println is redirected to CloudWatch. And of course, System.out.println outside serverless is a little bit problematic because out.println is synchronized. But with Lambda, it's not a huge problem because there will be never two requests in the same Lambda. If you build your own multi-threaded kernel, be more careful. But if you just implementing Lambda with Quarkus and without threads, System.out.println is the easiest possible choice. My next choice is System Logger. So the System Logger is a little bit more sophisticated logging framework. Ships with Java, no log4j, and you can format the messages easier. It's called System.logger. So I covered this in short several times already. And Christian says, yeah, traditional EE servers seem dead. So that's changed a lot in the last few years. Yeah, what means that? So I get still, requests to help with migration from Java EE to Quarkus. And at the end of the day, we get almost the same code, which runs on Quarkus. And the cool story is actually a huge success story because my clients invested in Java EE. And right now we can start the same code on different runtimes, which is actually a dream after 20 years, right? And we had actually today a chat with Adam from Geekon. His name is Adam Dutzak. He is the JAG leader from Posen. And he asked me about that, clients and standards. And there were projects where they stick with Java EE and relate. And over the years, we deleted more and more code. And now we can migrate to Quarkus. And there were other projects which, tried akka and reactive programming and play framework, and whatever they tried, it died. So, and Java is still alive. So I would say Java is a great actually success story, because the runtimes evolved over time. We started with Java Web Server, then it was WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, Whitefly, then the how it's called, Thorntail project, right, which was a predecessor of Quarkus. Then Quarkus, and also on Oracle side there is a Helidon and Micronaut. So I think a great success story. And even if you do Spring, you have to know Java EE, because most of Spring projects, I think they still use JPA, and this is identical code to Java EE. So for me, success. Okay, now time travel, which is interesting. 8 years back. So what we saw, what I was asked about is HA singletons in Java EE. And the singletons is still a hot topic nowadays, because it's really hard to implement singletons in the cloud. And I get lots of questions regarding timers, schedulers in a cluster, for instance. And this is the reason, don't do this, rely on cloud. For instance, event bridge scheduler will ping you from outside. In the events bridge scheduler is the singleton. Then JMS redelivery in the case of rollback or system failure. So what's the question? So the question is, how do you find the right balance between using an existing library, MicroProfile or otherwise, or using Java SE, or maybe partly reinventing the wheel? Yeah, for me, Java SE has the absolute priority, because it's the absolute core, and partly reinvent the wheel a little bit is not a problem. For instance, if you need a little bit of JSON, you could actually use Java SE with multi-line strings to create JSON for testing. There is no need to use a JSON-B or JSON-P, right? Or if you just have to call a GET request, you can just use HTTP 11 client. And but yeah, I mean, a little bit reinventing the wheel is good if you can cut the dependency, and you have to be pragmatic about that, and not spend 20 hours in meetings to decide whether it's the right choice or not, right? Above gives error when Lambda is invoked in AWS Lambda. When Lambda is invoked in AWS Lambda. I don't know what it means. I think the streams Lambda is invoked. You should, AWS Lambda must not invoke another Lambda. So this would be, this is not, it can, but is a bad practice. JMS redelivery. So the problem is with JMS redelivery is always, or message redelivery is also a huge topic in Lambdas and Kinesis, SQS or SNS, is how to recover from failure, because if you can redeliver the message if the endpoint is idempotent, it means you can send the same message twice without having side effects. Hosting Java EE projects on premise on the cloud. Interesting. This is I actually did this in the cloud land, and will also do in the next workshop. So what turned out is back then is the following: that if you have Quarkus, it's basically Java EE code. You can run it on bare metal, so with Java -jar. You can run it in a Docker image, and you can run it at the same time as AWS Lambda. And you can actually do this at the same time. So you can pick the same code and have a load balancer with an EC2 machine, a Docker image, and AWS Lambda. Okay, you must not rely on the order of messages. If you have a messaging system, this is actually a good start. And this is a very common pattern. Where to put cross-cutting classes in the boundary control entity structure? I still get it, this question. And if you have no idea, put it in the root, in the absolute root of the project. And what's usually meant, what about classes like logging, which are not part of the use case, but very important one. What I do, I will create a component called logging, logger, or log, and put classes there. Deploying a single war, we don't deploy wars anymore. How to deal with useful libraries in a thin war environments. Yeah, the question is how to share libraries, and this was back then huge topic with microservices, because everyone said Microsoft absolutely independent. And then it's like, yeah, it's what do we do with DTOs, right? And back then we said, okay, there are no shared libraries. Otherwise, you don't need microservices. Test coverage of system tests, still ongoing topic. So what you can do is you can run the JICOCO agent in Quarkus, perform system tests, and you get the test coverage from system tests. Works well. JSON-P versus JSON-B. I have to say, over time, I tend to use JSON-P more. And you will find something interesting. In the ZMCP project, I use org.json. This is like the absolute reference implementation of Java. And I did a very crazy thing, but don't tell anyone. So what I did is I copy over like 50 classes, the entire JSON implementation to my project, and it's in my project right now. And why I did it? Because I'm waiting for JSON in Java itself, and then we'll remove it. Okay, this is my leisure project, so it's absolutely fine. How to separate environments in Java EE. Also relevant question, also covered during the Cloudland conference, and I will also cover during the workshop. Long story short, I would say the natural successor of Java EE is serverless. Why? Because Java EE fully focused on business logic and removed all the plumbing. The Java EE developers were actually never interested in the application servers. They were only interested in the application code. And serverless goes even a step further. So, but if you are in serverless environment, what we do is every developer can get the complete environment completely for free, because you pay in serverless per invocation, and if you are just using your environment for tests, you won't pay anything. UI stack options in modern Java applications. All my UI projects right now are based on web components. So there are no frameworks. I think it's getting more and more popular, and everyone loved the idea. So if you have to build front ends, take a look at standards first. And this is like custom elements, web components. CSS is crazy powerful. So how to manage database connections? So and Docker. So Docker is actually easy because you could expose the with Docker network. But the broader question right now is how to do that with in serverless, because if you have many lambdas and there's one database, you get many connections. So you will need a kind of a proxy, a PG bouncer or RDS proxy to do this. And if you're interested, there's an airhacks FM podcast about StackRes. So we also had a chat exactly about that. What is JavaX inject singletons? It's crazy. They were really good questions 8 years ago. So, and the interesting part is this JavaX inject singleton was actually implemented or designed by Spring. And back then, Rod Johnson, so the Java 6 is almost done, and Rod Johnson standardized the CDI, the dependency injection, and proposed the JSR 330. This is the add inject specification with 5 interfaces. Which what happened then is this Java 6 was postponed, but they took the dependency injection from the standard, and it is used as CDI right now. So CDI is more than add inject, and therefore singleton is very similar to application scoped. But in singleton there are no proxies. In application scoped you have proxies. Funny fact, also Spring suggested the specification. This specification was taken by Java 6, but is ignored by Spring, to my knowledge. So there is not a lot of add inject in Spring. Also interesting, Swagger integration and Jersey. So it is already open API is part of MicroProfile, was standardized, and this basically was. So I think 8 years ago, and if someone will ask the questions right now, they will be still up to date, and I still get the same questions. Yeah. Now, what happens here? Okay. So now this one. What do you think about separating Quarkus from core logic? I'm thinking about creating a multi-module project with a domain project that contains core logic and without any dependencies, and a second one which contains the rest Quarkus stuff. Interesting idea. The question is, what do you gain with it? So, because if everything is one project, is easier. And in recent projects, we had one Lambda with several hundred classes and everyone was happy. So, Christian, the idea is good. But what I thought more in Quarkus with Docker is to separate the in Docker layering the common Quarkus functionality in one layer and inherit from that, and then just put the business logic to the lower layer. This could be an interesting topic. I think we are done. Not I think, we are done. We covered everything in the show. This was a little bit longer. Take a look at ZMCP. You can test it with Claude or with a tester. So I will extend the documentation a little bit. And we are done. So Emmanuel Lopez. Hi, Emmanuel. Thank you for watching. And see you next time in August. It's almost autumn. It's crazy. So thank you a lot. And see you next time. Bye.